My entire childhood was trampled under the feet of a selfish younger brother. And as if that wasn't enough, when we became adults, he didn't just ruin my life, he delivered the most disgusting betrayal imaginable. He slept with my wife and let me raise his child as my own. Welcome to Storytime Reddit, everyone. From the time I was barely old enough to understand what family meant, I learned a cruel, unspoken truth love, even within a household that should be your safe haven, is not always shared equally. If you're thinking my younger brother David resented me because I got more love or attention from our parents, think again. The truth was the complete opposite. David wasn't some overlooked child starving for affection. He was the golden boy, the chosen one, the pride of my mother's heart, and me, I was just the other one, the spare, a background character in the story of my own life. My mom doted on David in ways that went far beyond ordinary favoritism. She cooked his meals, folded his laundry, cleaned up after him without complaint, and when it came to schoolwork, she didn't even ask him to try. Instead, she asked me to do it for him. "You're his big brother," she'd say. "Siblings are supposed to help each other." But help only flowed one way in our house. I gave David everything: my time, my patience, my protection, yet when I needed something, anything, he turned his back without hesitation. And the worst part? My parents acted like it was perfectly normal. I suppose I was too quiet, too self-sufficient for them to notice I was drowning. They assumed silence meant I didn't need anything. That I was strong enough to go without love, without fairness, without acknowledgement. So I raised myself. I kept my mouth shut, tucked away my pain, and watched as my brother was handed everything while I learned to survive on scraps of affection and invisible effort. But the inequality didn't stop at favoritism. It evolved, it festered, it transformed into something darker, something cruel. David didn't just ignore me. He mocked me, relentlessly. My glasses, my height, my quiet personality-everything about me became a punchline for him. He broke into my room, rifled through my personal thoughts, read my journals, then tattled to our mom about the things I wrote like it was a comedy show. I'd be humiliated, burning with rage, only for her to chuckle and say, "He's just teasing, don't be so sensitive." I remember one morning, I poured myself a bowl of cereal and nearly cracked a tooth on small pebbles he had snuck into it. When I told our mother, she just let out an exasperated sigh and said, "That's what brothers do. It's all in good fun." What kind of fun is built on humiliation and pain? As we got older, the torment only got worse. David didn't just bully me at home, he did it at school too. He saw me getting picked on by classmates, and instead of stepping in, he joined them. Called me names, urged others to gang up on me. He thrived on my suffering. One day, after a particularly heated argument, he looked me dead in the eyes and said something I'll never forget: "You should just kill yourself." Those words, they were like a blade straight to the soul, coming from my own brother. And at a time when I was already grappling with depression, self-doubt, and emotional exhaustion, that sentence didn't just hurt, it nearly broke me. That was my childhood. A long, quiet war fought under the shadow of a brother who was adored for no reason and cruel for sport. I was just a ghost in my own family, a placeholder, a punching bag. But what I didn't know back then, what I couldn't even imagine, was that David's cruelty wasn't finished. Because as I struggled to piece together a future of my own, the same brother who destroyed my childhood would come back to destroy my adult life. The betrayal didn't come from a stranger. It wasn't just some external heartbreak. No, it came from the two people I should have been able to trust the most: my wife, Karen, and my brother, David. The boy who turned my childhood into a nightmare grew into the man who would tear apart the family I built with my own hands. And Karen, the woman I believed was my forever, would become the knife he used to finish the job. From the moment I was old enough to understand the world around me even just a little, I learned a truth so cold and unfair, it left a scar I still carry to this day. Love within a family isn't always fair. It isn't always kind, and sometimes it's not even there at all. Most people assume that when there's tension between siblings, it's because one child gets more attention, more praise, more affection. Maybe that's what you're thinking right now, that my little brother David resented me because I was the favorite, but the reality was the complete opposite. David was the golden child, the chosen one, the boy my mother placed on a pedestal so high the rest of us couldn't even see the bottom of it. And me? I wasn't the smart one, or the funny one, or even the troublesome one. I was just there. the background noise in a story that was never mine to begin with. My mom didn't just favor David, she worshipped him. She cooked his favorite meals like clockwork. She folded his laundry as if it were sacred cloth. And when it came to school, he didn't even have to lift a finger. That was my job. You're his older brother, she'd say, with a fake sweetness in her voice. It's your responsibility to look out for him. But it was never mutual. I gave David everything, my patience, my energy, my time. I stood up for him when other kids mocked his laziness. I did his assignments, covered for his lies, took the blame for his mistakes. And when I asked for help, even something as small as someone listening, he was nowhere to be found. Worse, he'd laugh. My parents? They watched it all unfold like it was completely normal. I guess I was too quiet, too low maintenance. In their eyes, I didn't need the same love. Maybe they thought I was strong enough to go without it, but inside, I was crumbling. I learned how to parent myself. I learned how to comfort myself. And most of all, I learned that in our home, fairness wasn't a roulette, was a luxury only David could afford. But the injustice didn't end with chores or praise. It evolved into something darker. David didn't just act entitled, he became cruel. He taunted me about my appearance, my glasses, my quiet nature. He'd sneak into my room, violate my privacy, read my journal out loud, then mock me to our mother as if it were comedy gold. And her response? He's just being playful. Don't be dramatic. One morning, I found pebbles in my cereal. Yes, actual small rocks. If I hadn't noticed in time, I could have broken a tooth. When I told my mom, she didn't gasp or yell. She didn't even look up from her coffee. She just sighed and said, "Brothers do that. It's how they bond." Bond? What kind of bond is built on humiliation and injury? It got worse. As we grew older, David didn't just bully me at home. He made it his mission to ruin me at school. He joined in with my bullies, gave me nicknames like mutant and worthless, and laughed while others pushed me around. And then came the moment that shattered something deep inside. Measuring a heated fight, he stared me dead in the eyes and said, "Why don't you just kill yourself?" I can't explain what those words did to me, especially coming from him, brother. At that point in my life, I was already fighting a storm of mental health struggles. That sentence wasn't just cruel. It was gasoline on an already raging fire. That was my childhood, living under the crushing weight of silence, invisibility, and cruelty. Watching David receive unconditional love while I fought for scraps of attention. I was the scapegoat. The afterthought. The one nobody noticed was drowning until it was too late. But if I thought that was the worst David could do to me, I was wrong. Because as I clawed my way into adulthood, determined to build something better, something real, he came back. And this time, he didn't just target me. He came for the life I'd worked so hard to build. Because the woman I trusted the most, Karen, the love of my life, became the weapon he used to destroy me once and for all. Yes, David, the boy who made my childhood a living nightmare, became the man who shattered my marriage. And Karen, the woman I believed was my forever, turned out to be the one who buried the final knife deep into my back. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding this story into the next chapter, or adapt it further for your YouTube narration style. She told me it all began during Thanksgiving, the very first time she met my family. Karen said she noticed the distance between David and me, how we barely spoke, how the tension lingered in the air like a storm waiting to strike. She claimed she wanted to help bridge that gap. She thought that if she could get us to talk, to share laughs over movies or board games, maybe we could repair something broken. So she invited him into our moments, into our space, into our relationship. And I, naive as ever, thought, this is great. She's helping us reconnect. I let my guard down, believing that maybe, just maybe, David was finally trying to be a brother. But what I didn't realize was that while I was letting love in, they were sneaking betrayal in through the back door. Behind the smiles, behind the small talk, behind the clinking of glasses and forced holiday cheer, they were starting something they both knew would destroy me. David, the brother who had humiliated and bullied me all throughout childhood, and Karen, the woman I had loved more than anything, the one I believed was building a life with me. These two people, the ones I should have been able to trust without question, were betraying me right under my nose in my own home. Karen confessed that she had abruptly left on New Year's Eve because that was the night she decided to end things with David. But the damage had already been done. 2 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. And instead of telling me the truth, she fed me a lie wrapped in false hope. When I asked her why she didn't come clean back then, her response was cold, calculated. Because you were the stable one. I wasn't her great love story. I wasn't her soulmate. I was her backup plan, the dependable fallback, the man she could count on to raise her child, even if that child wasn't mine. I asked if they had stayed in contact. She nodded. No shame, no hesitation. She admitted they had continued meeting at hotels during what she called business trips. Half the time she told me she was on the road for work, she was actually escaping to be with him, my brother. The same person who had turned my youth into a nightmare was now sharing a bed with my wife while I stayed home raising their child, thinking he was mine. By that point, I wasn't even angry anymore. Anger would have been a luxury. All I felt was numb, hollow, like my soul had been scooped out and thrown into a void. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam a door. I just stood up, packed a bag, and walked out, quietly. Karen chased after me, sobbing, pleading, trying to pull me back into the lie. "If you love me, you'll forgive me," she cried. I saw myself holding the little boy's hands as he tried to balance on his first bike. I remembered the nights I sat by his bed, reading the same story over and over until he drifted off with a smile. I could still feel his tiny arms around my neck when he cried after a nightmare. And now, every single one of those memories felt suspended in question marks. I used to think that love made you a father. But when trust is shattered, even love begins to tremble. And I was about to find out whether the child I gave my heart to was ever really mine at all. I used to believe that no matter what happened, no matter the pain, the betrayal, the broken promises, I could still be a father. That love, when it was real, could endure anything. But I was wrong. Because the truth is, even the strongest love becomes fragile when trust is shattered. When the DNA results finally arrived, I sat there holding the envelope for what felt like hours. My hands were cold, my heart pounding. I told myself I was ready, that no matter the answer, I'd face it like a man. But when I unfolded that paper and read those few clinical lines, it felt like my entire life had just collapsed beneath me. David was the biological father. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. It was as if time itself had stopped just to let me feel every ounce of devastation all at once. Everything I had sacrificed, every late night, every scraped knee I patched, every bedtime story I told, every hug, every tear I wiped away, it all meant nothing now. At least, that's how it felt in that moment. I went numb. Karen cried. She begged. She dropped to her knees in front of me, like she was trying to rewind time with her tears. She clutched my hands, her voice shaking. "Please don't leave him. He didn't do anything wrong. You're still the only father he's ever known." And she was right. He didn't do anything wrong. He was innocent. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't look into that boy's eyes without seeing David's face looking back at me. I couldn't tuck him in at night without thinking about the betrayal that created him. Every moment with him would have been a reminder of the man who destroyed my childhood and the woman who helped him destroy my future. Some people might say I'm heartless, that I abandoned a child who didn't ask for any of this, and maybe they're right in some ways. But I know this much: I have the right to heal. I have the right to step away from what breaks me, and sometimes healing doesn't come from holding on, it comes from letting go. So I filed for divorce. Karen and her attorney tried everything they wanted alimony, citing that I made more money. They painted her as a remorseful wife, a struggling mother, but the court wasn't fooled. The betrayal, the infidelity, the DNA results, it all spoke louder than any courtroom speech ever could. The judge ruled in my favor. I owed her nothing. And when I walked out of that courthouse, I didn't just walk away from a broken marriage. I walked away from a prison I hadn't even realized I was living in. I was a free man finally, and completely. Since that day, I haven't seen the boy again, not because I hate him, but because I needed to shut that door for good. I knew if I stayed connected to him, Karen would always have a reason to pull me back into her orbit, and I couldn't let that happen. I needed peace. I needed a clean slate, no more lies, no more ghosts from the past. Maybe one day, if I'm ever strong enough, I'll find him again. Maybe I'll explain, maybe I won't. But for now, I need something I haven't had in a very long time. Time. And silence. That's how I'm choosing to love myself. I laughed. A sharp, bitter laugh that came from years of swallowed pain. I asked him, "When was the last time we were brothers? Was it when you crawled into bed with my wife? Or when you let me raise your son for years without telling me the truth?" Silence. Then he broke down and cried. Really cried. He told me everyone had disowned him, our parents, our relatives, our grandparents. I already knew that. But I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt done. I told him, "You chose this path, and now the price you pay is living a life without me in it." And then I hung up. In that moment, I stopped being the older brother who always forgave. I stopped being the punching bag. I stopped being the fool. I became something I should have been a long time ago. A man who finally knew when to walk away. And just like that, I hung up the phone. In that exact moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't the older brother who always took the hits anymore. I wasn't the guy who swallowed pain for the sake of peace. I became a man who had finally learned the hardest lesson of all, when to walk away, before kindness becomes self-destruction. The days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and slowly everything quieted like the eerie stillness after a violent storm. No more waking up in the middle of the night, haunted by what-ifs and why-nots. No more checking my phone with a pit in my stomach. No more desperately trying to justify someone else's cruelty with my own capacity to forgive. I had moved on. Not because I forgot, not because the pain magically disappeared, but because I finally accepted the scar would always be there and that I could still live, even thrive with it. My life now feels simple, grounded, peaceful in a way I never thought possible. I'm not rushing into another relationship. I'm not searching for someone to fix me or fill the void. I don't need some glossy version of happiness to prove I'm okay. Instead, I pour into myself. I work hard, I sleep well, I eat better. I've started going to therapy not because I'm broken, but because I want to understand myself better. I want to live, not just survive. And the man who used to feel like a stranger me does become one of the few people I genuinely trust. Every Saturday morning we meet for a round of golf. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we sit in silence. And sometimes all we need is a look, a shared glance to understand how exhausted we are from carrying the weight of a family that was never whole. My mother, who once idolized David, doesn't bring him up anymore. There's no need to pretend, no apologies required. We've found peace through shared silence and unspoken agreement that some things are better left unsaid, and some wounds can only heal in stillness. As for David, I hear about him occasionally through a cousin. He dropped out of college after the financial support dried up. He's now working at a small-town garage as a mechanic, far from the golden future our parents once imagined for him. And Karen, the woman who once sobbed and begged me not to leave her? She's living with David now, raising the child I once thought was mine. Maybe they're trying to rebuild from the wreckage they created. Maybe they're learning how hard it is to live with the consequences of their own betrayal. I don't know, and honestly, I don't care. Not because I hate them, but because they're not part of my story anymore, not in the chapter I'm writing now. I used to believe David was the root of all my pain, but now I see things differently. I was part of that pain too. I was the one who stayed silent for too long. I was the one who forgave over and over even when forgiveness was destroying me. I was the one who tried to hold everything together while no one else even tried. But that version of me, he's gone. Today, I've stepped out of that darkness. I've been promoted. I go to therapy regularly. I've learned how to love myself, not just in words, but in action, in boundaries, in self-respect. I no longer seek approval. I don't need permission to heal. I don't owe anyone an explanation. I only need one thing, to remind myself every single day that I deserve better. And for the first time in my life, I am finally giving that to myself without apology, without fear. Maybe one day David will figure out who he truly is when there's no one left to belittle, no one left to manipulate, and nothing left to control. Maybe that little boy, the one I once called my son, will grow up, find me, and ask why I walked away from everything we once were. And if that day comes, and I'm ready, I'll sit him down. I'll look him in the eye, and I'll tell him everything, not to hurt him, but to help him understand. But today, I choose to live for me, for the quiet I once feared, for the peace I thought I'd never earn. No more hate, no more guilt, no more living under anyone else's shadow. Just a man who finally learned how to put the final period in the right place and walk forward with nothing but clarity, strength, and peace.